The millionaire thought she was just a maid, a nobody. After 12 years of loyal service, he fired her without a second thought. But the very next day, she reappeared, not as a victim, but as a powerful investor in his biggest project. The grand oak doors of Jonathan Cartwright's office stood ajar, revealing the vast space within. Rich mahogany walls framed shelves lined with leather-bound books, trophies, and framed photographs chronicling his meteoric rise to wealth. A fireplace crackled in the corner, but the warmth failed to reach the chill in the room. Jonathan, in his early 50s, sat behind a massive desk, his tailored suit impeccable, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the glowing screen of his laptop. Evelyn stood at the threshold, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She had walked these halls for over 12 years, becoming a quiet constant in the chaos of Jonathan's empire. Today, however, the space that once felt familiar now seemed alien, hostile even. Her uniform, a crisp white blouse and black slacks, felt like a fragile armor against the tension she sensed brewing. "Come in," Jonathan's voice carried across the room, low and clipped. He didn't look up, his focus seemingly consumed by the endless stream of data scrolling across his screen. Evelyn stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. She stopped at the edge of his desk, keeping a respectful distance. "Mr. Cartwright," she began, her voice steady. "You asked to see me?" Jonathan finally looked up. The cold intensity in his gaze made her pause. "Do you know why you're here, Evelyn?" Her stomach tightened. The question was sharper than she had expected, laced with a quiet accusation. "No, sir, but I assume it's important." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Important? Yes, I'd say so. You've worked here for, what, 12 years? 12 and a half, Evelyn replied, her voice tinged with pride. "I've always done my best to serve you and the household." Jonathan tilted his head, studying her as though she were a stranger. "And in those 12 and a half years, would you say I've treated you fairly?" The question caught her off guard. She hesitated. "Yes, sir. I believe so." "Then help me understand something." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like the blade of a knife hidden in velvet. "How is it that sensitive information about my newest project, details that only a handful of people know, found its way into the hands of Victor Langston?" The name landed like a thunderclap. Victor Langston, the man whose presence loomed over Jonathan's empire like a shadow. Evelyn felt the weight of the accusation settle over her like a suffocating blanket. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision. "I would never." Jonathan cut her off with a raised hand. "Spare me the denials, Evelyn. The leaks started weeks ago. They're precise, targeted. And you, more than anyone, have had unfettered access to my home, my schedules, even this office." Her chest tightened. "Mr. Cartwright, I have never betrayed your trust. If there's been a breach, it didn't come from me." He stood abruptly, his presence dominating the room. "Do you think I can afford to take that chance? You've had years of loyalty, but loyalty isn't currency, Evelyn. It doesn't pay dividends." His words cut deeper than she expected. Evelyn swallowed hard, fighting to keep her composure. "After everything I've done for you, I don't deserve this." Jonathan's face hardened. "You don't deserve this? Tell me, then, how did Victor Langston gain an edge on a project I've kept under lock and key? How did he suddenly start bidding on contracts I hadn't even announced yet?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked slightly, the sting of betrayal tightening her throat. "But it wasn't me." "You're dismissed," he said, the words cold and final, effective immediately. For a moment, Evelyn stood frozen, her mind refusing to process what she had just heard. "You're firing me?" Her voice was a whisper, disbelief etched into every word. "You can leave your keys with security on your way out," Jonathan continued, his back already turned. "This conversation is over." Evelyn's chest heaved as she tried to quell the storm rising within her. "After all these years, you're just throwing me away? Without proof? Without a second thought?" Jonathan glanced back over his shoulder, his gaze icy. "You should leave while you still have the dignity to do so." The finality of his words left no room for argument. Evelyn turned sharply, her heels clicking louder now as she crossed the vast office. She stepped through the oak doors, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and sorrow. The mansion's sprawling corridors stretched out before her, their opulence now suffocating. She passed by the grand chandeliers she had dusted hundreds of times, the gilded mirrors that reflected her image over the years. Each step toward the exit felt heavier than the last. As she emerged into the cool evening air, she took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She glanced back at the mansion, a fortress of wealth that no longer felt like home. The massive gates loomed ahead, but something else caught her eye. A sleek black limousine idled near the entrance, its engine purring softly. The driver, an older man with a calm demeanor, stepped out and opened the rear door. Evelyn froze. The man gave her a small nod, one that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement, an invitation. For a moment, she hesitated, torn between walking away or stepping into the unknown. Then, with quiet determination, she slid into the car. Inside the mansion, Jonathan stood by the window of his office, his silhouette framed against the warm glow of the fireplace. He watched as the limousine pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the distance. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, his confident mask slipping for just a moment. He had always trusted his instincts, but tonight, for the first time, he wasn't sure if he had made the right choice. The morning light filtered through the towering windows of Jonathan Cartwright's study, illuminating the intricate patterns of the Persian rug and the faint outlines of cigar smoke that still clung to the air. Jonathan sat at his desk, his usual air of command replaced by a quiet unease. The previous night's events replayed in his mind, Evelyn's face etched in his memory, not with guilt, but with something else. Defiance. His assistant, Martin, knocked softly before stepping into the room, a tablet in hand. "Sir, there's something I think you should see." Jonathan gestured for him to enter, masking the tension bubbling beneath his composed exterior. "What is it?" Martin placed the tablet on the desk and swiped to reveal an article from the business section of the morning's paper. The headline, bold and damning, sent a chill down Jonathan's spine. Former Cartwright employee spotted at Victor Langston's estate. A strategic defection? The accompanying photo was grainy but unmistakable. Evelyn, stepping out of a sleek black limousine in front of Victor's sprawling estate. Her posture was composed, her face partially obscured by oversized sunglasses. The image sent a ripple of anger and something else, something unnameable, through Jonathan. She didn't waste any time. "Did she?" he muttered, his jaw tightening. "Victor's already using her as a pawn." Martin shifted uncomfortably. "It's possible, sir, but the details are odd. According to our sources, she wasn't seen entering the house. She was dropped off, stayed briefly, and then left. No meetings, no exchanges, nothing substantial." Jonathan leaned back, his fingers drumming on the desk. And yet, there she is, in front of his estate. The optics alone are enough to spark speculation. Martin hesitated before continuing. "That's not all. Victor's firm has seen a surge in its stock price this morning, largely fueled by rumors of insider knowledge on your latest project." Jonathan's stomach churned. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. He had spent months refining the blueprints for the Phoenix Tower, a bold architectural statement that was meant to cement his legacy. Yet somehow, Victor had gained a foothold in the bidding war for the project's prime location. "She knew the details," Jonathan said, his voice quieter now, more to himself than Martin. "She had access to everything." "Sir, Evelyn worked for you for over a decade," Martin said cautiously. "Are you certain she'd betray you like this?" Jonathan's eyes darkened. "I don't have the luxury of certainty, Martin. Not when Langston's breathing down my neck." Martin nodded, wisely choosing to stay silent. He had seen Jonathan's mistrust harden over the years, forged by betrayals both real and imagined. It was a survival mechanism in their world, one Jonathan wielded as ruthlessly as he did his business acumen. As the morning wore on, Jonathan's mind raced. The question wasn't just why Evelyn had gone to Victor. It was how she'd ended up there so quickly. Had she been planning this all along, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike? Or had Victor approached her after the firing, capitalizing on her vulnerability. The doubt gnawed at him, threatening to undermine the foundation of his decision. To distract himself, Jonathan called for his team of analysts to present updates on the Phoenix Tower project. Yet even as they discussed zoning regulations and potential partnerships, his focus wavered, his thoughts circling back to Evelyn. By mid-afternoon, Jonathan found himself pacing the expansive living room of his mansion, his frustration mounting. He had seen Victor pull off stunts like this before, targeting competitors' weaknesses, exploiting their missteps. But this felt personal. Victor wasn't just after his company. He was trying to dismantle Jonathan's confidence, piece by piece. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, jolting him from his thoughts. The name on the screen made his chest tighten. Robert Langston, Victor's brother, a lawyer with a penchant for stirring the pot. Jonathan answered, his tone clipped. "What do you want, Robert?" Now, Jonathan," Robert said, his voice dripping with faux camaraderie. "No need to be hostile. I just thought you might be interested in a little friendly advice." "I'm not in the mood for games," Robert chuckled. "Oh, this isn't a game. I just thought you'd like to know that Evelyn seems to be doing quite well for herself these days." Jonathan's grip on the phone tightened. "Cut to the point. She's been spotted making waves in certain circles," Robert continued, clearly enjoying himself. "And if I were you, I'd be careful. Someone with her insight could be invaluable to the right person." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "If this is Victor's idea of intimidation, tell him it's not working." "Who said anything about intimidation?" Robert replied smoothly. "I'm merely pointing out that you might have underestimated her. But don't worry, I'm sure everything will work out for you." Eventually, the call ended, leaving Jonathan seething. He tossed the phone onto the couch and ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts a chaotic tangle. He hated the way Robert had framed it, as though Evelyn's departure was his loss, as though she was the one pulling the strings. That evening, Jonathan found himself alone in his study, nursing a glass of scotch. The room felt oppressively quiet, the weight of the day settling heavily on his shoulders. His gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the bookshelf, a candid shot of his team during a company retreat years ago. Evelyn was there, off to the side, her smile subtle but genuine. For a moment, he allowed himself to remember the quieter moments, the way she'd anticipated his needs without being asked, the rare times she'd offered a quiet word of advice. She had been more than a maid. She had been a fixture in his world, someone who understood the rhythms of his life better than most. And now, she was gone. Worse, she was with Victor. Jonathan's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Martin entered, looking uneasy. "Sir, I've found something." "What is it?" Martin hesitated before handing over a thin folder. "Bank transactions. Evelyn's account has been receiving steady deposits over the past 6 months from a shell company linked to Victor Langston." Jonathan flipped through the pages, his heart sinking with each line. The pattern was undeniable. Payments, regular and consistent, dating back to long before the leaks began. "I knew it," he muttered, anger flaring in his chest. "She's been in his pocket this whole time." "Sir, it's possible she didn't know the full extent of." "Don't make excuses for her," Jonathan snapped. "She made her choice." Yet even as he said the words, a sliver of doubt remained. The Evelyn he knew, or thought he knew, wasn't the type to sell her integrity for a paycheck. But the evidence was damning, and in his world, evidence outweighed sentiment. As the night deepened, Jonathan sat in the dim glow of his study, staring at the folder. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture they painted was murky, incomplete. Evelyn's betrayal, or whatever it was, still didn't make sense. And until he uncovered the truth, the weight of it would remain, pressing down on him like a shadow he couldn't escape. The low hum of polite conversation filled the ballroom of the Langston Foundation Charity Gala. Chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, their crystal prisms scattering light across a sea of elegantly dressed attendees. Waiters glided through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes, and the city's elite mingled under the guise of altruism, though everyone knew deals were brokered here as easily as handshakes. Jonathan Cartwright adjusted the cuffs of his tailored tuxedo, his jaw clenched as he surveyed the room. He hadn't wanted to come tonight, not after the events of the past week. But avoiding this event would only fuel the narrative that Victor Langston had bested him. And if there was one thing Jonathan couldn't afford, it was showing weakness. His gaze swept the room, searching for Victor, whose penchant for dramatic entrances was legendary. Jonathan's eyes paused, narrowing as they landed on an unexpected figure. Evelyn. She stood near the grand piano, her presence commanding in a way he'd never noticed before. Gone was the reserved maid in a uniform. Instead, she was a vision of poise and elegance in a sleek, emerald green gown that hugged her figure. Her hair, once pinned back in a practical bun, now cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders. Her hand rested lightly on a champagne flute, her movements graceful as she engaged in conversation with a cluster of well-dressed men and women. Jonathan felt a sharp pang of disbelief. What was she doing here? And how had she managed to step so seamlessly into this world? Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. You look like you've seen a ghost, came a familiar voice behind him. Jonathan turned to see Victor Langston, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, his signature smirk firmly in place. Victor, Jonathan greeted coldly. I was wondering when you'd show up. Victor laughed lightly, clearly enjoying himself. And missed the chance to watch you squirm? Never. His gaze followed Jonathan's, landing on Evelyn. His smile widened. Ah, yes. Quite the transformation, isn't it? She cleans up well. Jonathan's jaw tightened. What are you playing at, Victor? Victor raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Me? I'm just here to enjoy the festivities. If Evelyn decided to grace us with her presence, that's her choice, not mine. Don't insult my intelligence, Jonathan snapped. You've been orchestrating this from the start. Victor's smirk deepened. You give me too much credit, old friend. Evelyn is far more capable than you realize. Maybe you should have seen that before you tossed her aside. Before Jonathan could respond, Victor clapped him on the shoulder, his tone light but laced with menace. Enjoy the evening, Jonathan. It's bound to be an enlightening one. Victor sauntered off, leaving Jonathan standing alone, his fists clenched. He turned his attention back to Evelyn, who now stood alone, her previous companions having dispersed. She seemed at ease, yet there was an unmistakable air of purpose in her posture. It wasn't a coincidence that she was here, not tonight. Jonathan spent the next half hour observing her from a distance, debating whether to approach. As he nursed his drink, the gala continued around him, the room buzzing with chatter and laughter. He didn't want to confront her here, not in the middle of a crowd, but the longer he waited, the more his curiosity burned. Finally, he crossed the room, weaving through clusters of attendees until he stood just a few feet away. Evelyn turned as he approached, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Jonathan, she said, her voice calm, almost amused. I didn't expect to see you here. That makes two of us, he replied, his tone clipped. You've been busy. She tilted her head slightly, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. I could say the same about you. The tension between them crackled like a live wire. Jonathan studied her, searching for any trace of the woman he thought he knew. But this Evelyn was a stranger, confident, composed, and completely unshaken by his presence. What are you doing here? He demanded, his voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. Evelyn sipped her champagne, taking her time before answering. I was invited by Victor. She raised an eyebrow. Does it matter? It matters to me, he said firmly. You've been aligning yourself with my rival, showing up in places you don't belong. Places I don't belong, she interrupted, her voice laced with quiet defiance. And where exactly do I belong, Jonathan? Back in your mansion, cleaning up your messes while you accuse me of crimes I didn't commit? Her words hit their mark, but Jonathan refused to let it show. You didn't answer my question. Evelyn set down her glass, folding her arms as she regarded him with a cool gaze. I'm here because I can be, because I've built something for myself outside of your shadow. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should reflect on why. Jonathan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a man approached, a prominent investor in the industry whose support Jonathan had been courting for months. Evelyn, the man said warmly, extending a hand. "It's wonderful to see you again. Your insights at last week's conference were invaluable." Evelyn smiled graciously, shaking his hand. "Thank you, Richard. I'm glad you found them helpful." The man turned to Jonathan, offering a polite nod. "Jonathan, it's been a while." "Yes," Jonathan replied stiffly.
"It has."
As the man walked away, Jonathan turned back to Evelyn, his frustration mounting. "What conference?" She gave him a knowing look. "The one you weren't invited to." The implication hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Evelyn wasn't just moving in these circles, she was thriving in them. And for the first time, Jonathan realized he might have underestimated her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Jonathan remained at the gala, though his mind was elsewhere. He watched Evelyn as she moved through the room, engaging effortlessly with people who had once been his allies. Each interaction chipped away at his certainty, leaving him with more questions than answers. When the night finally ended and Jonathan returned to his car, he couldn't shake the image of her. Poised, confident, untouchable. Evelyn had become something he couldn't control, and for a man like Jonathan, that was the most unsettling realization of all. As his driver navigated the quiet streets, Jonathan leaned back in his seat, his thoughts racing. Evelyn had made her move, but what was her endgame? And why did he feel like he was the one who had lost? The heavy oak doors of Jonathan Cartwright's penthouse office creaked as they swung open, revealing Victor Langston standing at the threshold, his usual air of unshakable confidence on full display. Dressed in a tailored suit, so precise it might as well have been painted onto him, Victor stepped inside uninvited, his eyes sweeping the room with amusement. "Cartwright," Victor drawled, his smirk widening as he closed the door behind him. "You look like a man who's seen better days." Jonathan, seated behind his imposing mahogany desk, didn't rise to greet him. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, fixing Victor with a cold glare. "What do you want?" Victor chuckled, sauntering to a nearby chair and making himself comfortable. "Hostile as ever, I see. I thought we might have a little chat." "I'm not in the mood for your games, Victor." Jonathan's voice was sharp, but there was a weariness behind it. The past week had taken its toll, with Evelyn's unexpected rise and the relentless leaks from his company gnawing at the edges of his control. Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. "No games, I promise. Just a friendly discussion between rivals." "Cut to the chase," Jonathan snapped. "Why are you here?" Victor's smirk softened into something more calculated, his eyes gleaming with the pleasure of a man holding all the cards. "Fine. Let's talk about Evelyn." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "Oh, don't play coy," Victor said, leaning forward slightly. "You fired her, didn't you?" Tossed her aside without so much as a second thought. Typical Cartwright. Always quick to pull the trigger when things get messy. Jonathan's silence was answer enough. Victor continued, savoring the moment. "And now, she's thriving. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The woman you underestimated has become the ace in my hand." Jonathan's fists clenched beneath the desk. "If you're here to gloat, you can leave." "I'm here to enlighten you," Victor countered. "You see, Evelyn didn't come to me out of desperation. She came because she saw an opportunity. The kind of opportunity you were too blind to offer her." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "What opportunity?" Victor shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Let's just say she has a talent for strategy. A mind sharp enough to navigate circles you only dream of breaking into." "She's not your pawn," Jonathan said, his voice low but firm. Victor laughed. "Pawn? Oh, Jonathan, she's far more than that. Evelyn is a queen, and the sooner you realize it, the better." Jonathan leaned forward, his composure slipping. "If you think for a second that I'll let you use her to dismantle what I've built, you already did that yourself," Victor interrupted, his tone suddenly colder. "You pushed her out, and in doing so, you gave her the freedom to surpass you." The words hit harder than Jonathan cared to admit. He forced himself to sit back, masking his unease. "If you're done, you can show yourself out." Victor rose, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "One last thing, Cartwright. You've always been good at building walls, around your business, your empire, even yourself. But Evelyn? She's learned how to climb them. And the higher she goes, the harder you'll fall." With that, Victor turned and strode out, leaving Jonathan alone in the silence of his office. The words lingered long after Victor had gone, like a splinter buried deep beneath his skin. Later that evening, Jonathan sat in the dim light of his private study, nursing a glass of scotch. His mind churned with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Victor's taunts had struck a nerve, but more than that, they had left Jonathan with a gnawing sense of doubt. Had he misjudged Evelyn? Was she truly the mastermind Victor claimed? Or was this another one of Victor's ploys to undermine him? The Evelyn he had known, the quiet, dependable maid who had seamlessly managed the intricacies of his household, seemed worlds apart from the poised, self-assured woman he had encountered at the gala. Jonathan's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. His assistant, Martin, entered cautiously, holding a tablet. "Sir, you need to see this." Jonathan gestured for him to proceed. Martin placed the tablet on the desk, his expression grim. The screen displayed a series of internal emails, confidential correspondence from within Jonathan's company. They were time-stamped from the past 2 months, each one containing sensitive details about the Phoenix Tower project. Each one had been forwarded to an external address. "It's worse than we thought," Martin said quietly. "The leaks weren't just isolated incidents. Someone inside the company has been systematically feeding Langston information." Jonathan's stomach sank as he scrolled through the emails. The sender was an employee he had trusted for years, a senior advisor who had been part of his inner circle. "This doesn't make sense," Jonathan muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Why would he?" "It gets stranger," Martin interjected. "The timing of these leaks lines up with Evelyn's dismissal. Almost as if," Jonathan's eyes flicked up sharply, "almost as if she was the scapegoat." Martin nodded. "Exactly." The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Evelyn hadn't been the source of the leaks. She had been the convenient target, her proximity to Jonathan making her the perfect suspect, and in his paranoia, Jonathan had played right into it. The next morning, Jonathan found himself staring out the window of his penthouse, the city skyline blurred by a thin layer of fog. The weight of his mistakes hung heavy on his shoulders. Evelyn had been innocent. Worse, she had been wronged by his own hand. But the question remained, why had she gone to Victor? If she wasn't betraying him, what was her endgame? A sudden thought struck him, sharp and unrelenting. He needed answers. Not from Victor, not from his advisors, but from Evelyn herself. She was the missing piece in this tangled web of deceit and ambition. And until he confronted her, the truth would remain just out of reach. Jonathan reached for his phone, his fingers hesitating over the screen. It wasn't easy for a man like him to admit he had been wrong. But for the first time in years, Jonathan Cartwright was prepared to do just that. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air of the small cafe on 8th Street, mingling with the quiet hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of ceramic cups. It was a far cry from the grandiose settings Jonathan Cartwright usually inhabited. Yet here he was, seated at a modest wooden table by the window, his thoughts swirling. He had reached out to Evelyn that morning, his message short and to the point. "We need to talk. Name the time and place." Her response had been equally succinct. 8th Street Cafe. Noon. Now, as the clock ticked closer to the agreed time, Jonathan's unease grew. He wasn't accustomed to admitting fault, and the prospect of facing Evelyn again felt more daunting than any boardroom showdown he'd ever encountered. The doorbell jingled, and Evelyn stepped inside, her presence commanding despite the simplicity of her attire. She wore a tailored black blazer over a cream blouse, her hair swept into a sleek ponytail. Her expression was neutral, her sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on Jonathan. She approached with measured steps, sliding into the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence heavy with unspoken tension. "You're punctual," Jonathan said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I always was," Evelyn replied, her tone even. "But I doubt that's why you asked me here." Jonathan exhaled slowly, leaning forward. "You're right. I wanted to." He paused, searching for the right words. "I wanted to clear the air." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint, humorless smile. Is that what this is? An apology? Yes, he admitted, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. I was wrong to accuse you. I know now that you weren't responsible for the leaks. Her gaze softened slightly, though her guard remained up. And what made you come to that conclusion? Another one of your advisors feeding you information? Jonathan shook his head. No, I found evidence. The leaks came from someone inside my company. Someone I trusted. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. So, you finally figured it out. I should have listened to you, Jonathan admitted. Instead, I let my paranoia get the best of me. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. You didn't just let paranoia get the best of you. You fired me without proof. You humiliated me, cast me out as if I were nothing. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Jonathan's chest tightened at her words, but he met her gaze head-on. You're right. I let my fear and arrogance cloud my judgment. And for that, I'm sorry. The sincerity in his voice seemed to catch her off guard, but she quickly masked it, her posture remaining composed. Apology accepted, she said, though her tone suggested forgiveness was not a simple matter. Jonathan cleared his throat, shifting gears. I need to know something. Why did you go to Victor Langston? Evelyn tilted her head slightly, as though debating whether to answer. Finally, she said, because I had no other choice. That's not an answer, he pressed. Victor's been using you as a pawn in his game against me. Why would you let him? Her eyes flashed, the controlled calm giving way to something fiercer. Let him? Do you think I wanted to go to him? You fired me, Jonathan. Do you know what happens to someone like me when their reputation is tainted by accusations like yours? Doors close. Opportunities disappear. I had nothing. Jonathan flinched at the raw emotion in her voice. He hadn't considered the ripple effects of his actions, the way they had likely shattered the life she had built over a decade of loyalty. But Victor didn't take me in out of kindness, she continued, her tone hardening. He approached me because he saw an opportunity, and I took it because I had no other options. What did he want from you? Jonathan asked, his voice quieter now. Information, she said bluntly. Your business practices, your upcoming projects, your vulnerabilities. But I didn't give him what he wanted. I'm not a traitor, Jonathan, no matter what you might have thought. Then what did you give him? His brow furrowed. Evelyn's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. Nothing he didn't already know. I played along just enough to keep myself afloat while figuring out my next move. Jonathan leaned back, processing her words. She hadn't betrayed him. If anything, she had outmaneuvered both him and Victor, carving out a new path for herself while maintaining her integrity. As their conversation continued, Evelyn revealed more about her time with Victor. She described how she had used his connections to gain a foothold in the world of high-stakes investments, quickly proving her value to people who mattered. She had attended conferences, pitched innovative ideas, and built a reputation as a sharp strategist, all without compromising her principles. You underestimated me, Jonathan, she said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. You always saw me as just a maid, someone invisible. But I was paying attention, learning, observing. And when you pushed me out, I realized I could do more than just survive. I could thrive. Jonathan felt a strange mix of emotions, admiration, guilt, and a hint of regret. Evelyn had become something extraordinary, but she had done so despite him, not because of him. Victor must have hated that, he said, attempting to inject a touch of levity. Evelyn smirked. Oh, he did. He thought he could control me, but I made sure he knew otherwise. Jonathan's lips twitched into a faint smile. And now, she said, rising from her seat, I have my own path to follow. One that doesn't include being underestimated. Jonathan stood as well, unsure of how to end the conversation. If there's any way I can make this right, there's nothing to make right, she interrupted. What's done is done. You gave me the push I needed, even if it came at a cost. She turned to leave, but paused at the door, glancing back at him. Good luck, Jonathan. You'll need it. And with that, she was gone, leaving him standing alone in the cafe. his mind racing with thoughts of what might have been and what was still to come. The rhythmic clicking of Jonathan Cartwright's polished shoes echoed through the marble hallway as he approached the conference room. The air in his downtown office building was thick with tension. His flagship project, the Phoenix Tower, was teetering on the edge of disaster. Investors were pulling out, citing concerns about leaks and instability within his company. The situation had gone from difficult to dire. His assistant, Martin, fell into step beside him, a tablet in hand. "Sir, we've received word that the Lansing Group is officially withdrawing their funding." Jonathan's stride didn't falter, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. "Reasons?" "They mentioned concerns about the integrity of the project." "The leaks haven't helped," Martin replied cautiously. Jonathan exhaled sharply, pushing open the heavy door to the conference room. His senior team was already assembled, their expressions grim. As he took his seat at the head of the table, the room fell silent, the weight of their collective anxiety palpable. "Let's not waste time," Jonathan said, his tone commanding. "What's the status of the Phoenix Tower?" One of his advisors, a gray-haired man named Caldwell, spoke first. "Without the Lansing Group's backing, we're short nearly 40% of the necessary funding. We're reaching out to other potential investors, but the timeline is becoming a problem. Construction delays are already costing us." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The Phoenix Tower wasn't just another project. It was meant to be his legacy, a testament to his vision and dominance in the industry. Losing it wasn't an option. "We need alternatives," he said firmly. "If Lansing won't stand with us, we find someone who will." The room exchanged uneasy glances. Caldwell hesitated before speaking again. "There might be one option." Jonathan's gaze snapped to him. "I'm listening." Caldwell cleared his throat. "It's unconventional. Evelyn Montgomery." The name hung in the air like a live wire. Jonathan's expression darkened. "What about her?" "She's gained considerable influence in the investment community since," Caldwell hesitated, "since her departure from your employ. She's been making waves as an independent investor, and her recent partnership with Victor Langston has elevated her profile even further." Jonathan's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "And you're suggesting I approach her for funding?" Caldwell nodded reluctantly. "She has the resources and the connections to stabilize the project. More importantly, she understands the industry. Your industry." Jonathan's initial reaction was to dismiss the idea outright. Evelyn had become a reminder of his missteps, his failure to recognize potential until it was too late. Yet the practicality of Caldwell's suggestion gnawed at him. Evelyn had proven herself. She had played the game better than he expected, and now she was in a position to dictate terms. That evening, Jonathan sat alone in his penthouse office, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. A glass of scotch sat untouched on the desk as he stared at the folder in front of him. Inside were detailed reports of Evelyn's recent ventures, strategic investments, high-profile partnerships, and, most notably, her role in salvaging Victor Langston's failing project months earlier. Evelyn had become a force to be reckoned with. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had pushed her out, and now she was thriving in a world he had unwittingly prepared her for. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. The screen displayed a text message from Martin. "Meeting confirmed. Evelyn Montgomery, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Jonathan exhaled deeply. He had taken Caldwell's advice, though it felt like swallowing a bitter pill. The prospect of facing Evelyn again, this time as a supplicant, was far from appealing. But the Phoenix Tower was too important to let pride stand in the way. The next day, Jonathan arrived at a private lounge in one of the city's most exclusive hotels. The setting was deliberately neutral, chosen to avoid drawing attention. As he entered, his gaze immediately landed on Evelyn, who was seated at a corner table. She was dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray pantsuit, her posture exuding confidence. "Jonathan," she greeted coolly as he approached. Punctual as always. He offered a tight smile, taking the seat across from her. "Evelyn, thank you for agreeing to meet." She folded her hands on the table, her expression unreadable. "I was curious. You've never been one to ask for help." "This isn't about me," he replied, cutting straight to the point. "It's about the Phoenix Tower. I need a partner, and your name came up." Evelyn arched an eyebrow. A partner? That's a generous term. Considering the circumstances, Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone measured. You're in a position to make this project a success, and I'm willing to offer a significant stake in exchange for your support. Evelyn leaned back, studying him with an intensity that made him uneasy. You've come a long way, Jonathan. A few months ago, you wouldn't have given me the time of day, let alone offered me a partnership. Things change, he said simply. Yes, they do, she agreed, her tone softening slightly. But before I consider your proposal, I need to know something. Why me? Out of all the investors you could approach, why did you choose the woman you fired without a second thought? Jonathan hesitated, the weight of her question pressing down on him. Because I was wrong about you, he admitted. I underestimated you, Evelyn, and I see now that you're more than capable of succeeding in this world. You've proven that. Evelyn's expression softened, but only slightly. And what happens when this project succeeds? Do you take the credit, or do you acknowledge the role I played? You'll get the credit you deserve, Jonathan replied, his voice firm. I'm not here to make the same mistake twice. A small smile tugged at the corners of Evelyn's lips. Good answer. The negotiation that followed was swift but thorough. Evelyn made her terms clear. A substantial equity stake, full transparency, and the authority to make strategic decisions. Jonathan agreed, though the concessions didn't come easily. He wasn't used to relinquishing control, but for the Phoenix Tower, he was willing to adapt. As they finalized the agreement, Evelyn's demeanor shifted. She extended a hand across the table, her grip firm when Jonathan shook it. Let's build something remarkable, she said, her voice tinged with both determination and a hint of challenge. Jonathan nodded, a strange mix of relief and respect settling over him. As they left the lounge, the city's skyline stretched before them, the setting sun casting the buildings in gold. For the first time in weeks, Jonathan felt a glimmer of hope. The Phoenix Tower might still rise, but more importantly, he was beginning to rebuild something he hadn't realized he'd lost: trust. The boardroom of Cartwright Enterprises was bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon sunlight streaming through its floor-to-ceiling windows. Jonathan Cartwright stood at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, addressing his senior team. The Phoenix Tower was back on track, and the energy in the room was cautiously optimistic. The final agreements are signed, Jonathan announced, his tone measured but resolute. We're moving forward with Evelyn Montgomery as our principal investor and strategic partner. A murmur spread through the room. While Evelyn's name had been whispered in business circles lately, her involvement at such a high level came as a surprise to many. Jonathan allowed the reactions to simmer for a moment before continuing. This partnership isn't just about funding. Evelyn has proven herself to be a valuable asset in this industry, and her expertise will be integral to this project's success. His gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge his decision. One by one, the murmurs quieted. Jonathan's authority, as always, was unquestionable. As the meeting adjourned, Jonathan lingered, staring out at the city skyline. The Phoenix Tower's location was visible in the distance, an empty lot that would soon transform into the crown jewel of his empire. But his thoughts were elsewhere, turning over the lingering mysteries surrounding Evelyn. Her swift rise to power, her refusal to fully align with Victor Langston, the precision with which she had maneuvered through their world. Jonathan had always prided himself on seeing the bigger picture, but Evelyn remained an enigma. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Evelyn stepped inside, her presence commanding as ever. She wore a dark green blazer, her hair swept back in a style that balanced elegance with authority. There was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself, one that Jonathan couldn't ignore. I assume the meeting went well, she said, closing the door behind her. It did, Jonathan replied, turning to face her. You've already made an impression. I aim to, she said simply, her lips curving into a faint smile. Jonathan gestured to a chair, but Evelyn remained standing, her sharp eyes scanning the room. You wanted to see me? Yes, he said, crossing his arms. There's something I need to ask. Her brow arched slightly. Go on. You've been calculated from the start, Jonathan began, his voice steady but probing. Every move you've made has been deliberate. Aligning with Victor, distancing yourself from him just as quickly, carving out your own space in this industry. It's all been precise. Evelyn's expression didn't waver. And I can't help but wonder, what's your endgame? She studied him for a moment, her silence heavy with meaning. Then, with deliberate care, she took a seat at the table, her gaze locking onto his. Jonathan, do you know why I worked for you for over a decade? To support yourself, he replied without hesitation. That was part of it, she acknowledged. But the real reason? I admired you. I wanted to learn from you. And I did. Every day, I watched how you operated. How you built an empire out of nothing. You were ruthless, yes, but you were also brilliant. Her voice softened, taking on an edge of vulnerability that caught Jonathan off guard. I told myself that if I ever got the chance, I'd take what I learned and do something with it. But then, you fired me. Jonathan frowned. You think I did you a favor? No, she said, her tone sharpening. You betrayed me, and that betrayal lit a fire under me. It forced me to prove to myself, and to you, that I was capable of more than you ever gave me credit for. Jonathan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to push back against the accusation, but he couldn't. Everything she said was true. Evelyn continued, her voice steady. Victor saw my potential, but he underestimated me. He thought he could use me to get to you. What he didn't realize was that I was playing my own game. What game? Jonathan asked, leaning forward slightly. She smiled faintly, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. The Phoenix Tower isn't just a project for me. It's my chance to prove that I'm more than the person you fired. And now, I'm in control of its success. The weight of her words settled over Jonathan like a heavy blanket. For the first time in his career, he wasn't just working with someone. He was working for someone. Evelyn held the keys to his future, and she knew it. That evening, Jonathan found himself reflecting on their conversation. He couldn't shake the sense of admiration mingled with frustration. Evelyn had not only risen to his level, but had outmaneuvered both him and Victor Langston to claim her place. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence of his penthouse. It was a notification from his legal team. The final documents for the Phoenix Tower partnership had been processed. Evelyn's name was officially tied to the project and to him. Jonathan stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone down. The Phoenix Tower was back on track, and his legacy was safe. But the project had taken on a new meaning. It was no longer just his dream. It was theirs. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at the construction site of the Phoenix Tower for the first official investor tour. She wore a hard hat and a tailored jacket, her presence drawing the attention of everyone on site. Jonathan was already there, overseeing the preparations. When he saw her, he walked over, extending a hand. Ready to get started? He asked, his tone light but sincere. Evelyn shook his hand firmly. Always. As they walked the site together, the tension that had defined their relationship began to ease. For the first time, they spoke not as adversaries, but as equals, two people united by a shared goal. By the end of the day, Jonathan felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Not just for the Phoenix Tower, but for the possibility of redemption. Evelyn had proven herself, and in doing so, she had forced him to confront his own flaws. As the sun set over the city, casting the construction site in hues of orange and gold, Jonathan turned to Evelyn. "Thank you," he said simply. Evelyn glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "For what?" "For not giving up on this," he replied, gesturing to the towering cranes and scaffolding. "And for not giving up on me." She didn't respond immediately, but her slight nod spoke volumes. Together, they watched as the city skyline transformed, the foundation of the Phoenix Tower promising a brighter future. Not just for the project, but for both of them. The early morning sun bathed the city in a golden glow as Jonathan Cartwright stood on the observation deck of the nearly completed Phoenix Tower. The sleek, glass-covered structure soared above the skyline, a monument to ambition and resilience. Below, the hum of construction filled the air, but Jonathan's attention was fixed on the horizon. He hadn't been to the site this early in weeks, preferring to leave the day-to-day oversight to Evelyn. Yet today felt different. The project was finally nearing completion, and he wanted a moment to reflect, not just on the tower, but on everything that had led them here. Quite the view, isn't it? Evelyn's voice broke the silence. Jonathan turned to see her walking toward him, her stride purposeful but relaxed. She wore a tailored coat over her work clothes, her expression calm yet focused. The sight of her, so confident, so at home in this world, still caught him off guard. Evelyn had gone from being a fixture in his household to a cornerstone of his professional life, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. "It is," Jonathan replied, his voice softer than usual. "You've done well here." "We've done well," she corrected, stepping up beside him. Her gaze swept over the city below. "This tower wouldn't exist without both of us." Jonathan nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. Their partnership had been an uneasy one at first, fraught with tension and unspoken grievances. But as the weeks turned into months, they had forged something unexpected: mutual respect. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for later that afternoon, and the site buzzed with activity. Workers put the final touches on the tower's exterior while event staff set up a stage and seating area at its base. A large banner bearing the project's name, Phoenix Tower, a legacy reborn, fluttered in the breeze. Jonathan and Evelyn descended from the observation deck, their conversation turning to last-minute details. As they walked through the main atrium, a sleek, modern space with soaring ceilings and natural light streaming in from every angle, Jonathan paused. "Evelyn," he said, his tone serious, "there's something I need to say." She turned to him, her expression curious but guarded. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I fired you, I was wrong. I let my fears and assumptions cloud my judgment, and I nearly lost everything because of it." Evelyn's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "You could have walked away," Jonathan continued. "You could have taken everything I taught you and used it to destroy me. But instead, you chose to build something better, not just for yourself, but for all of us." Her expression softened, though her tone remained measured. "It wasn't just about proving you wrong, Jonathan. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. And you did," he said simply. "More than I ever could have imagined." For a moment, the weight of their shared history hung between them. Then Evelyn extended a hand, her grip firm. "Here's to a better future, for both of us." Jonathan shook her hand, a rare smile breaking across his face. "To a better future." As the ceremony began, a crowd gathered at the base of the tower. Investors, city officials, journalists, and even construction workers filled the rows of chairs, their attention fixed on the stage. Evelyn stepped up first, her speech concise but powerful. She spoke of resilience, vision, and the importance of collaboration, her words striking a chord with everyone in attendance. When it was Jonathan's turn to speak, he approached the podium with a newfound sense of humility. He glanced at Evelyn, who stood to the side, watching him with an expression of quiet pride. "Today," he began, his voice steady, "we celebrate not just the completion of a building, but the culmination of a journey of growth, of mistakes and redemption, and of finding strength in unexpected places." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I want to acknowledge someone who has been instrumental in this project's success. Evelyn Montgomery. Her determination and insight have not only shaped the Phoenix Tower, but have also reminded me of what it means to truly lead." The applause that followed was genuine, and for the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt a sense of peace. As the crowd dispersed after the ceremony, Evelyn stood near the base of the tower, watching the sunlight reflect off its glass facade. Jonathan approached, his hands in his pockets. "Not bad for a couple of underdogs," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. Evelyn chuckled softly. "Speak for yourself. I've always been a winner." Jonathan laughed, a sound that felt uncharacteristically light. "Fair enough." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling over them. Then Evelyn turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Jonathan, this tower isn't just your legacy anymore," she said. "It's ours." He nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "Ours." As Evelyn walked away, her figure framed by the gleaming tower behind her, Jonathan felt a strange sense of pride, not just in the project, but in her. She had forced him to confront his own flaws, to see the world through a different lens. And in doing so, she had changed not just his life, but his perspective. The Phoenix Tower stood tall, a testament to their shared journey. And as Jonathan watched Evelyn disappear into the crowd, he realized that while the tower was a monument to their success, the real triumph lay in what they had built together: trust, respect, and a new beginning.